It's really easy to waste a lot of time when fishing offshore for bass, which can be really frustrating. That's why I always try to identify bass on my traditional sonar, like downscan, side scan, and 2D sonar, before I make a cast offshore. In this video, I want to show you my full process for identifying bass on my fish finder before I fish an area, which resulted in me catching fish on my first cast on 2 different offshore structure spots. This is a very valuable lesson that'll help you catch more fish offshore. Let's get into it.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Fish at the Moment. Today I'm out on Beaver Lake in Arkansas. It's the middle of October and I want to show you an area that gets overlooked by a lot of anglers in this fall time, and that is basically fishing around islands that are in the mouths of bays. Whether you're on a highland or lowland reservoir, these islands have a lot of flats around them, and if you can find one that has some access to the main lake out here as well as a shallower bay, it acts as a great place that attracts bass in the fall. Now, I don't know if these fish are going to be up really shallow on this deal, let's say on the back side of this, or if they're going to be further out here towards the main lake. There are some boulders and just a bunch of stuff out here that's interesting that I've seen in the past. So we're going to graph around, see if we can find anything interesting out here. I'm already seeing a few fish that potentially could be swimming around out here in some of these rocks and stuff, though I'm not seeing anything that really blows me away. And what I'm hoping to find is a school of fish that's actually setting up out here in anywhere from, let's say, 10 feet of water all the way out to like 40 feet of water. In the fall, fish can set up in a lot of different depth ranges, so you have to graph a lot of depths to start establishing where you should be fishing. Now we can see some really nice rocks right here on our side scan and on that 2D sonar view, but I'm not seeing any fish around them, and so I'm not going to really bother actually making a cast. So I did see one fish that was just up here in about 15 feet of water, which is interesting. I'm not going to necessarily mark that because I don't have a good sense of whether those fish are actually going to be up there in that depth yet, but it does give me a clue that we may need to be looking a little bit shallower today in that like 15-ish foot zone rather than looking out super deep. But we're not going to eliminate the possibility of fish being out here deep as well right off the bat. We're going to kind of make a couple passes around out here. You can see there's actually a really nice drop off out here all the way out here in like 40 to 50 feet of water. And while that does seem deep, again, in the fall time, fish can be that deep. So don't want to rule it out. I'm actually going to set my range a little bit deeper as we graph further out here just to check it out. I like to check all of these things, guys, really deep water, really shallow water when I get started in the fall, because you will be surprised how many fish will group up in both depth ranges on the same day. So we may actually find that we find a school of fish out here in 40 and a school of fish up there in 10, all in the same general zone. But right now I'm not seeing any bait fish. I'm not seeing any fish activity at all out here really, really deep. We may hit a threshold where like right at 40 feet, the lake just completely goes crazy and there's fish and bait everywhere, but it doesn't look like that's necessarily the case right now. And we did see a bait ball and a fish up there in that 15-foot zone. So I think that's probably the zone we're going to be dealing with today, at least in this section of the lake. If we run further up the lake or down the lake, depending on the water clarity and temperature and stuff, the fish can set up in different depth zones. But it looks like, at least for right now, I'm not seeing any bait out here really, really deep. A few rocks and a few things, but nothing that really gets me excited. So let's move up a little bit shallower, up into that like 10 to 15 foot zone, and see if we can see any fish up there. Okay, so I made my way back up here into this 15-ish foot of water zone, and immediately I'm starting to see a little bit more activity and a little more life. You can see a few dots scattered around on the side scan view, and you can also see a fish that kind of popped up a little bit on that 2D sonar, though they're not big fish by any means. So I'm not getting overexcited, but it is good to know that we may be able to find some fish up in this depth zone. I'm going to go over here and set my depth range back down a little bit because we're not going to be graphing out there in like 40, 50 feet. Now I'm going to try to put my boat right in this 15-foot of water zone and graph around the backside of this island. You can see that this island has a nice big flat in here, and there's a little bit of a saddle right in here on this island. And a lot of times those fish will set up on those saddles or close to them because the wind will blow over and the current will move through those areas, and it will congregate a lot of bait fish and just kind of get the fish excited. So we're gonna roll through there and just see if that's the case. I want to find some type of bait fish or cover or something. And one thing I'm noticing is I'm not seeing really any fish or bait as we get further back into this pocket as well. That may change here in a second. But if we don't find any bait further back in here or any fish, then that might tell us that we actually need to be fishing a little bit more towards the main lake, and we're now starting to kind of get a sense for where everything's happening. I do like the fact that there's a little bit of a rock pile just to the left of the boat. There's a little bit of bait activity right there too as well in that 10 foot of water zone. I do like the look of this. I'm thinking there may be some potential if we can find a couple rock piles up here, because that bait fish in that 10 foot of water could be an indicator there's potentially some fish up here. Let's graph around here just for a minute more and see if we can see any more bait or any more fish, and if not, we're gonna head back towards the main lake. Man, that's some really pretty rock right there, but we don't see any fish or bait around it. We even have a brush pile. Look at that. That looks sweet. And actually, there's a fish in that brush pile. There we go, guys. That's what we've been looking for. You can actually see, if we switch over to this side-by-side view, we can see a fish setting up in this brush pile right there. That's a fish. We're gonna mark that pile. That is a great sign. 10 foot of water brush, that's exactly what I like to fish this time of year. And it's the first brush pile we found. I don't know if there's any more brush in this area. We're gonna have to kind of scan through this whole area now and try to find some brush, because if they are setting up in like that 10 foot of water in the brush piles, we could absolutely hammer them right now. So let's keep graphing around, but that spot was a little bit further back here, right where that transitions from this steeper bank back into this flat, kind of where you expect these fish to be in the fall, is right in that transition zone. There's another one over here and another one kind of over here in this zone, so we may be able to graph around this entire bay, and there's also going to be one on the other side of this island as well. So I'm going to spin us back around. Seeing that fish in that brush pile, and also the fact that we saw the bait fish up there in that 10 foot of water zone, gives me a pretty good clue that we're in the right general depth zone. Again, 10 to 15 feet is what we kind of expected. Now we just have to find a few more areas. I don't like to just fish one brush pile if possible. I like to try to find 3 or 4 before we start fishing. And it may be worth even fishing a couple of those rock piles in that same depth zone, just because those fish might be setting up so tight to the rocks that I can't see them. So I'm gonna mark a couple of rock piles. I'm gonna mark hopefully maybe a few more brush piles, and then maybe we're gonna get onto something good here.
Finding bass offshore with a fish finder can be a frustrating process, especially if you don't have the right settings on your fish finder. You could graph over a great school of fish, but with the wrong settings, you could completely miss it. That's why I created sonar settings guides and put them on my website, fishthemoment.com. These are the settings I've used on all the different fish finders I've had on my boat over the years. They're specifically tuned to find bass, and I give detailed step-by-step instructions on how to change every single setting you need to get the clearest possible image, so you don't waste time on the water with bad settings. Definitely check out my sonar settings guides at fishthemoment.com.
Okay, we went across that brush pile again, and yeah, there's definitely some fish around it. You can see them on the 2D sonar. We also have some random brush and stick-ups and rocks as well just past it. We're gonna mark this as well. These could definitely be holding some fish, depending on if they're sitting really tight to the bottom or not right now. We do have some sunny skies. We see a little more bait fish up here in this 10 foot of water as well. So I think that this is definitely the depth zone that we wanna be focused on. So I'm gonna try to keep that boat right at 10 feet and graph the rest of this bay, just to see if we can find a few more targets to throw at. I'm almost confident, pretty confident we're gonna catch fish off that right there, just because we've seen a few fish. But it'd be nice to have 5 or 6 little spots to fire at, and maybe we can put multiple fish in the boat in this one area. Okay, so we got another little brush pile and some more rock here right in that 10 foot zone. It's kind of hard to tell on that if there are any fish in that, but I'm just gonna mark that brush really quick. It's in the same depth zone, and it's hard to see on that side scan if there are fish in it or not. I don't wanna go right over the top of it again, so we'll just kind of mark that, and we'll probably swing by there if we find more brush. And a lot of times if you can find fish in one little brush pile, all the brush piles in the same general zone are gonna have fish. And I've caught them for years in these little bays in the fall, finding isolated pieces of brush and fishing a finesse jig, shaky head, stuff like that. You can absolutely wreck them this time of year doing it. And you can pretty much pull up on every single little pile you see and just catch one. So this is a good pattern. The main trick is just finding enough brush, enough little rocky spots to fish. But once you put the time in on the graph to find enough of them, you should be good to go. There are other little island areas and bays and stuff like this around the lake too. So if we at least catch them here, we can replicate this in other areas as well. This is not that big of an area to begin with, but let's hope there's a few more brush piles at least here so we can start running a pattern. Looks like we got a little more brush right there, and I can actually see a fish right in that. That's really cool, guys. You can see a fish in that brush pile right on that little transition from some harder bottom to softer bottom. And if we zoom this in, you can actually see the fish are right here. That's a fish. You can see the shadow of the fish right there, and that's a fish. So that's 100% brush we need to be fishing. Let's mark these little stick ups too, just to have those marked. There we go. Out of the pile here. Good one too. Jig in a brush pile. That's what I'm talking about, guys. But as easy as it comes. Nice spotted bass there. Whew. Mark that guy up. Threw in that brush pile with just a little 5/8 ounce fish at the moment offshore jig and a really nice spotted bass. That's a beautiful fish right there. Good one for Beaver Lake as well. Man, just lined up on that brush pile, old school style, and he bit that thing. Oh, there we go, guys. You can see no forward-facing sonar right there. Just a football jig and a brush pile. Classic fall pattern right here. All I was doing was firing that jig out, got my waypoint lined up right here, got my range rings set to 100 feet, and I'm spot locked, and basically threw that jig up in that brush pile where we marked that fish. And I've actually had a couple more bites out of some of these brush piles. I think they're just smaller fish, and I'm just trying to focus on throwing a jig in these things right now, because on Beaver Lake I like to try to throw a bigger bait to get a better than average fish. There's a lot of 12-inch spotted bass in these brush piles, and you could throw a shaky head, a drop shot, and get a lot more bites, but I'm trying to catch those 1.5 to 4 pound fish out here. I mean, this time of year, it's gonna take 13 to 15 pounds for 5 fish to win a tournament. So you wanna be getting those better than average fish, and by throwing a jig, you just give yourself a better chance at that. And my jig was literally in the heart of that brush pile when that fish ate, and that was pretty sick. I love catching them on the jig out here. Gotta get relined up on my cast. I missed it on that cast. But firing that jig out there, really nothing to it other than just getting that jig around that pile, and that's what those waypoints and the icons are for. But again, I'm not just fishing every single brush pile I see. We actually saw fish in this pile on the side scan view. And there's another pile right up here, the first one we marked, that also had a fish in it. Same depth of water. I have a really good feeling we're gonna start catching them out of these deals. So let's keep fishing this one for a second, see if we can get our bite. If not, we're gonna keep running piles. Oh, come on. That's 2 I've missed out of the same pile. The first one felt big too. He pulled on it, and I've missed him twice now. Look, he just tore up my jig. How did he miss that thing? I have no idea how he missed that. That's 2 casts in a row on this same pile. It's the first one we marked. There are fish up in this thing. I've just done a bad job right now of getting them in the boat. I can't believe that. I don't think you're gonna bite again. That's 2 fish now I've screwed up out of this pile. I doubt I'll get another chance out of this. First one felt big too. First one felt like a really good one. And I mean, it validates our pattern. There's one right there, come on, eat it. My rod tip is going crazy there. He has it. Got him, there we go. There we go. 3rd time's a charm, I guess. There's a bunch of them down in that pile. Nice fish in our spotted bass. Not a big one, but just a nice fish right there. Finally got him in the boat. Get back down there. Just some spotted bass in this pile, nothing crazy, but I did feel one really good one bite it. Let me fix up my jig here.
And that's it for this video, guys. I didn't catch any big ones in this video, but I've caught a lot of big fish over the past 15 years in the fall on this pattern. Definitely give it a try on your local lake to get a lot of good fish in the boat. Thanks for checking out this video, and we'll see you on the next one.